Canada. Maple syrup and like Cabin say, ay, kick your ass all hockey season, ay, Mounties be riding horses, ay, yeah, it's in Canada.
We don't have pictures because I suspect we'll have pictures when they go to the actual Israeli Defence Force. There's a handover there. All this is unfolding over the next 1 to 2 hours, and then as Cam Redden told us, we see 1,700 Palestinian prisoners let go, 1,950 actually, 250 from jails and 1,700 from Gaza. So that's the deal. Sharri Markson is my colleague. She's been commentating on this all afternoon, and obviously she's covered this hostages situation for 2 years. Sharri, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Ultimately, what credit can be given to Donald Trump? What do you think was the clincher in this deal?
Well, before we go into the credit, I just want to say, Andrew, this is the most incredible breaking news to be reporting, that 7 hostages who have been in the tunnels of Gaza for the past 2 years, 738 days, are now in the Red Cross vehicles on their way to the IDF, to the safety of Israel, to be in the arms of their loved ones. 7 hostages have now been handed over. This is the most truly incredible moment. I'm going to tell you their names. They are Omri Miran. He's 48. He's got 2 young daughters waiting at home for him. They haven't known if their father was going to make it for 2 long years. Omri Miran, a 48-year-old father, is on his way home. So are twin brothers, 28 years old, Gali and Ziv Berman. Gali and Ziv Berman. They were abducted from their home on October 7 at Kibbutz Kfar Aza. There's also Guy Gilboa Dalal, just 24 years old. His brother managed to escape. Now, the last we saw of Guy was when Hamas released a propaganda video of him earlier this year, and he's believed to be in a very, very bad condition. So he is on his way home. There's also Matan Angrest, 22 years old, and that's the footage I mentioned earlier. We've seen of his family hugging and celebrating, joyously dancing when they learnt that he was among the first to be released and he's coming home. There's also Eitan Moore, 25-year-old. He was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, and then Alon Ohel, who I spoke about a bit earlier, he was in captivity with Eli Sharabi. He is on his way home. Andrew, this is the moment we have been waiting for. 7 hostages are with the Red Cross after 2 years on their way home to Israel. They are coming home. This is the beginning of the end of the war. To see them home, surely, I can't tell you, there will not be a dry eye. In all of Israel, there are hundreds of thousands of people on the streets celebrating, just waiting for that Red Cross vehicle to cross into Israeli territory. There'll be medical care immediately. They'll be given the opportunity to shower, to put clean clothes on. They'll be greeted by a social worker and medical staff who immediately check them out. And then after that period...
I hear the emotion from you, I see it. Do you want to sum up for you and Jewish Australians what this emotion is about? Why is it so significant? We're talking about 20 hostages, many being killed, many have been released. Is it the whole feeling of the war is finally over? Is it the feeling of the suffering of these people is now over? What's your overriding emotion at the moment?
Andrew, the connection between the Jewish community around the world and Israel is extremely strong. When the attack on October 7 happened, it wasn't just an attack on Israel. It was an attack on the Jewish nation. It was an attack on the existence of Jews. It was another iteration of the persecution that we've faced throughout centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years. 250 innocent Israelis and people of other nationalities as well were kidnapped into Gaza. It has been such a battle beyond anything imaginable to get them, to bring them home from the grips of terrorists. We know a lot about the conditions they've been held in.
I asked you earlier, what do you think ultimately clinched the deal?
I think the Qatar strike did it. The Qatar strike, and I can explain why. Qatar thought it was immune, it couldn't be touched by Israel. It had been harbouring the Hamas billionaire leaders for a long time, including helping finance their terrorism in part. They thought the Hamas leadership was safe there. Now, Israel took the extraordinary action of launching a strike on the Hamas billionaires living a life of luxury in Qatar. They thought they were untouchable. Now, Qatar then understandably complained heavily to the United States, to President Trump. He offered them protection. He signed an executive order saying that the United States would treat an attack on Qatar as an attack on America. But as part of this deal, he obviously forced them to return the hostages and agree to the peace deal. So, this is what happened. If it wasn't for that strike on Qatar, and then that, was the culmination of Israel eliminating the Hezbollah threat, eliminating the Houthi threat, all but eliminating Hamas. I mean, successive leaders
Trump,
of Hamas,
course,
and then Iran, of course,
Trump, of course, then got Netanyahu to say those words of apology to the Qatari leader. In a way, Trump, his book is The Art of the Deal. He was doing deals on both sides and creating this deal, wasn't he?
Look, Trump deserves every praise for making this happen. It would never have happened without Trump, and I do not believe it would have happened under any other president. But, for Netanyahu to apologise to a Qatari leader, Netanyahu's only priority is the survival of the Jewish state. That rests on his shoulders. So if it takes an apology, then so what? It takes an apology. That's all that matters to the Israeli Prime Minister. And, you remember, Andrew, that Golda Meir, when she was in another difficult war, she famously said, and I might get the precise wording wrong here, but she famously said, we'd rather be alive and hated than dead and pitied. And that's the sentiment that remains in Israel. The international community can turn against Israel. So what? It needs to win the war. It needs to ensure security for its people, which didn't happen in that catastrophic failure on October 7.
Indeed. And when you hear Netanyahu being booed, Shari, how much of that do you think is a residual feeling in Israel? Look, what happened to our intelligence services then, our much vaunted intelligence services? How did this even happen? How were these hostages even taken? How much of that is a feeling in Israel when people aren't happy with Benjamin Netanyahu? Yeah,
well, just two things there. He's a very controversial figure. Israel has a vibrant democracy. That's what we love about Israel. So they're half the population. I mean, the polls change all the time, but around half love Netanyahu and about half bitterly despise him. Fair enough. That's a democracy. That's how it is. There's regular elections. It's up to the people to vote in their politicians. In terms of the failure of October 7, I mean, that failure is catastrophic. There are people who, just Danny Masner, who is in Sydney in Australia this week. He's the brother of Galit Carbone, who was the only Australian murdered on October 7. I mean, Danny was over at my place yesterday. He was talking about this, how he sat in his safe room. He hid in his safe room for 20 hours before the army came. I mean, there are children whose parents were killed before their very eyes. The parents managed to hide them in a cupboard, and they were hiding in the cupboard for 12 hours before any army came to help them. So the government has always said that there will be a proper inquiry after the war, and that inquiry does need to happen because we cannot have a repeat of October 7. We need to know the intelligence failing, also the military failure. There's a lot of reports that Israeli soldiers were deployed north instead of south. This was a huge failure. And then the army that were in the area, a lot of them were killed. They were taken by surprise. So this all does need to be examined, but I think there was a false sense of security that's not there anymore.
And what happens with Gaza now? I mean, that is the real question. I mean, say the peace holds, the hostages are out. the place is destroyed. So Donald Trump's got his own real estate dreams there.
Yeah.
You know, but there's controversy over whether Tony Blair should be part of any rebuilding of it. You know, when you talk about this not happening again, how does it not happen again, and how does the joint get rebuilt? I mean, it is a happy moment, especially for Israel, but there are all these maybe intractable problems ahead, it seems to me. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think there's two issues. One is, how do you ensure a de-radicalisation of Gaza? How do you ensure Hamas is eliminated? And then the separate question is the rebuild. Now, over the years, hundreds of billions of dollars in international aid has gone into Gaza. Remember, Israel unilaterally withdrew Gaza in 2005. And since then, all that's been built is terror infrastructure. There's virtually nothing else to show for it. So in the rebuild, there does need to be this oversight body. Trump has suggested a board of peace, which he chairs, and as you say, Tony Blair is part of. That sounds like a good idea, because we can't have a repeat of that situation where billions of dollars in international money, including Australian taxpayer dollars, goes to terrorist infrastructure, including the vast network of tunnels underneath Gaza where Hamas have hid and built them under schools and hospitals, and that's what made this war so difficult for Israel to fight and caused the Palestinian casualties and suffering as well. So that there needs to be a proper rebuild with oversight of where the money and the funds are going towards. The Palestinians deserve a better life. They deserve a good life. Separately, there also needs to be a de-radicalisation program. The Palestinian Authority, which has been governing in the West Bank, not in Gaza, but even the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has had a pay-for-slay program where they pay lifelong salaries to the families of terrorists. So that is a problem. The education system is all indoctrination and hatred against Israel. So that is a problem. To break this cycle of violence, those things need to be addressed.
And the other issue, though,
deeper issue.
The other issue, Sherry's got to be, though, if you have, I mean, I've seen this play in Iraq, like if you have some sort of occupation in order to ensure security while a rebuild occurs, that in itself leads to terrorism. I mean, that's how does a rebuild actually occur with foreign help, with the safety of those people rebuilding assured?
It's going to be extremely difficult, very difficult. Then phase 2 is far more challenging than phase 1. The rebuild of Gaza, having a terror-free society. Who oversees it? As you say, is it Arab nations that will be part of the policing? Who is that? We know that in northern Israel, on the border with Lebanon, there were United Nations peacekeeping forces, and yet Hezbollah was able to regroup, weaponize under the very watch of the United Nations, and they progressed south, further south towards Israel, you know, below where they were meant to be but below where they were meant to be living. So this is a problem. Who is going to, we yet to see that detail from President Trump. He just says the war's over. He wants to move on. He wants to have the peace deal, and that's understandable. And thank God we have him, because we wouldn't be seeing these hostages return home without him. But the next step is definitely more challenging, and we are yet to hear the details. And there is a scenario, by the way, where the international community doesn't step up and Israel does have to go back in and take out Hamas if they refuse to hand in their weapons.
I wanted to ask too about, and look, that's a real possibility. I mean, we've already had reports of Hamas military-type forces, police-type forces in there. It seems a bit of a pipe dream to suggest Hamas is just going to leave the joint. I wanted to ask about how scarred these hostages are going to be, because that's the sad part about all this. In amongst the happiness, you know, you never get past this, do you?
Never.
Think of that footage of Elatiar David, you know, in the tunnel. Exactly. I don't know if we can see a bit of that. How on earth do you get over that? You know, that being starved, being forced to dig your own grave, living with the threat of death every day. We've seen a lot of Western hostages in these kind of environments before who've been able to get on with their lives after these scenarios. But it's a hard price to pay, isn't it? Is that something you think about today as you sort of get emotional and are also happy with the outcome?
No, so we're looking now at the screen of Evitar David, who you mentioned. He's just 24 years old. He looks skeletal, like a Holocaust. He's emaciated, digging his own grave under their orders in tiny, dark tunnels. I mean, he was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival alongside his friend, who's also going to be released, Guy Gilboa Delau. Guy has already been handed over to the Red Cross. Evitar will be in the next lot to be handed over at around 6 p.m. our time. But how do you get over it? I mean, Andrew, you've just got to compare it to Holocaust survivors. Some of them never get over it. Famously, many can never speak about it. Reading Eli Sharabi's book, I mean, he's had 6 months now out of the tunnels. He was in the tunnels for nearly 500 days in terrible conditions. Now, he's a very mentally strong individual. He kept himself going because he said he wanted to fulfill his promise to return home to his wife and his 2 teenage daughters. When he was kidnapped, he said to them, "I promise I'll come back for you." He thought they were going to be okay. So that's what kept him going every single day. And he acted as a motivator to the other 3 hostages he was with. One of them is Alon Ohel, who has been handed over to the Red Cross. So he's very mentally strong. Obviously, he's still traumatized, but he's been able to write a book, campaign for the release of the hostages, turn it into action, despite the incredible trauma. And when he was released, the BBC interviewed him and said, "What are you most looking forward to?" And he said, "Seeing my wife and daughters." And then when he was handed over to the IDF said to him, "Your big sister, Osnat, and your mother's waiting to see you." And in that instant, he knew what that meant. He knew his wife and his 2 daughters had been killed nearly 500 days earlier. And he had to go see their graves, and it was just terrible for him to come home to that. So some of these hostages released today will also be coming home to an unimaginable world. They will also have loved ones that have been killed, and they will forever have to live with that trauma of what they went through. There'll be a lot of counselling, a lot of social work, and as I mentioned earlier in the evening, there have been many suicides from people who did survive October 7. They have such survivor's guilt. They can't get out of their head. I mean, I've interviewed survivors of the Nova Music Festival, young girls who just can't get out of their head the sight of people being shot dead and the curdling screams in front of them. Apologies if this is too graphic for television. So the whole of Israel, we're celebrating tonight, but it's going to take a long time to heal if it's at all possible. It's just a matter of drawing on resilience and strength and determination to move forward and to rebuild.
I wanted to ask you, Sherry, and I've got Chris Kenny joining me now as well. I'll talk to him in a moment, but Donald Trump has got a couple of whistle-stop tours here. So he's sort of 3 or 4 hours, they reckon, in Israel and then the same in Egypt. One would imagine the length of those trips is partly based on security concerns. What do you think his visits achieve and what he's aiming to get out of them? And as as I sort of alluded to earlier, in making the deal, in being the king of the art of the deal, is he going to have to straddle both sides of the argument to some extent in those 2 visits?
No, Donald Trump is unashamedly pro-Israel. He says himself, this is the greatest friend Israel has ever had as president in the White House. He backs Israel. But of course, he's got to get this deal done. And there's nothing in the deal, by the way, that Israel doesn't want. Israel wouldn't agree to it if they didn't want it. They've resisted, Netanyahu's resisted American pressure at many points in the past. Joe Biden was demanding that Netanyahu not go after the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Netanyahu ignored him and Israel killed Nasrallah. Biden was demanding a ceasefire. Biden withheld weapons. Israel would do what's in Israel's interest. So this deal is broadly one that Israel can accept. No involvement of the Palestinian Authority in the post-governing of Gaza, no Palestinian state. You know, that's what the international community's been demanding. That's a reward at the end of the peace process, not before that.
All right, so what's his pitch in Egypt then?
Yeah, so the deal has broadly been agreed to now. So and every Arab nation wants peace in the region. No one wants this war continuing on. So I think he knows he'll get the deal done. He's going to get the most extraordinary heroes welcome in Israel. He's arriving with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, his press secretary as well, Caroline Levitt, Netanyahu and his wife Sarah, and President Isaac Herzog will greet him at the airport. Then Trump will be meeting with the families of some of the hostages, and then Trump and Netanyahu will do a joint address to the Israeli parliament around 7 p.m. our time. That's expected to last for an hour. It's going to be a huge deal of thanks, and he's going to be worshipped. There will be cheers. There's already billboards with his name on it. Israelis couldn't love President Trump more, not for anything else other than he has backed Israel every step of the way. He reinstated the weapons that Biden withheld. He went into Iran with the B-2 bombers to take out the nuclear weapons.
Indeed, yes.
He has brought these hostages home. These 7 hostages, he has done it. Trump has done it. No one else could have ever done it. None of these international leaders demanding a Palestinian state and a ceasefire, none of them could have done it.
Yeah, but
we'll see, Chris, if you don't mind. Yeah, so we'll see his response perhaps on Palestine to Anthony Albanese in about a week's time, and the recognition there. Chris, I did want to bring you in though, because I want to ask you, I mean, you served under a foreign minister in the aftermath of Iraq turning into something it wasn't supposed to be. What dangers are there ahead in terms of first of all, I'll ask you about your emotions about this day, but I also want to know about what dangers are ahead for America, for the West, for Israel, for everyone in terms of the reconstruction of Gaza going forward.
Well, there are massive difficulties ahead, Andrew, and the dangers are always extant. But the thing to understand about Israel's security in the wake of what's gone on 6 October the 7th is that Israel has never been more physically secure than it is now. It's taken care of Hamas. It's virtually wiped out Hezbollah and much of its armoury. It's got rid of the Iranian threat, and with Trump's help got rid of the Iranian nuclear program, and it's taken out the Houthis largely. So Israel is more secure than ever. This is the counterfactual that too many people don't understand. But of course, the road to peace in Gaza is going to be long. Today is a momentous day because the last of the living hostages and the bodies are coming back to Israel. Don't forget, though, of the 251 hostages taken, 100 have been killed. 100 have been killed. So the 20, despite the fact they've been through an incredible 2 years, more than 2 years of trauma and torture and starvation, are the lucky ones. 100 others have been killed. But as for rebuilding Gaza and somehow rebuilding the Palestinian territories so that they're not overrun by Islamist extremists of Hamas or Islamic Jihad or even Hezbollah in the West Bank in some way, is going to take a lot of work. And that is why Donald Trump is going to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. That's what Egypt is all about. The hostage deal will be done, but it's about signing the deal. But mainly it's about getting world leaders from the region and elsewhere committed to reconstruction. And reconstruction is a lot more complicated than the physical rebuilding of Gaza. It's about education and security. It's about healthcare and social services. And it's about doing all that without Islamist extremism, and Islamist extremism that Gazan children have been indoctrinated in for the past 2 decades. So it's a monumental challenge. But where Trump has got made the breakthrough is he's got most of the Arab world on board behind him. So it's going to be incredibly, it's prospective, although of course there are hurdles at every step.